And now for a conversation with YST's dad. Hello, everyone. Bront, CatHerder here. We're having some fun talking Raid Shadow Legends, and I am not alone. We have Colred back on the channel here. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Bront. I'm glad to be back on the channel, and we're going to be talking some free-to-play, which you know I love, so I'm very excited to see what we discover today.
Yeah, and it should be kind of fun because just for folks that are not aware, Colred's doing a lot of the free-to-play stuff anyway, but specifically he has got a strategy for the free-to-play Hell Hades challenge, which is going to basically slow roll the account because he's not pushing anything for the challenge. He wants to make a good account in 90 days to see where the best account is. I think that sums it up, right?
Yeah, basically, I just don't have the time to commit to like pushing the challenge really hard the way I did last year. So I thought, well, let's just see how a regular free-to-play account would measure up to these challenge accounts over the course of 90 days, because I honestly don't know. I've never done that comparison before, so I thought it'd be informative.
Yeah, and I've been certainly pushing hard with some stuff. It's not been perfect. And at this fair, I'm not pushing for points specifically. I'm pushing to get certain things done quickly in many ways to see how fast I can grow the account well, but I'm trying to not make too many compromises. But at the same time,
Sure.
there is the compromise of if you push something fast, you're going to miss a few things. And so I thought that would be actually kind of a fun topic to talk about a little bit about the slow roll, where you go with it, and at least early on, we're now 2 weeks into this, almost to the minute, and
Right.
kind of see where you're at versus where I'm at, and whether or not I've compromised much of anything by not doing the slow roll versus where you're at, or where we're at. So I think it was a good topic. And the first
Yeah.
and the easiest one probably to look at is the gem mine. I have definitely not unlocked the gem mine, and I think you said you have already?
Yeah, I have all 3 levels
Yeah.
unlocked. I actually did the 3rd level, I think, on day 12 or 13. I got the first one. So I did my masteries on my first champion on
Yep.
Athel. Then I did the gem mine to level 2, and then I did the masteries on my second champion, and then I unlocked the 3rd stage of the gem mine. So it wasn't all at once, it was kind of broken up.
Yeah.
But that means by about 111 or so, I should have my full investment returned.
Hmm.
And so for the long-term health of the account, that's clearly what you would do. And I knew I was giving away the potential maybe of completing a fusion for those gems, but I just thought that I have to do this. If I'm going to slow roll it and be honest about it, I have to unlock the gem mine.
Yeah, and I do think that that is a long-term best way to play it. In fact, I think the way you did it is probably correct. It may depend whether or not you buy your masteries on your second champion is probably going to depend on whether or not you can make another 6-star,
Right.
and or are you going to be, or do you have another champion you need to invest in that's like this champion's going to be good for the long-term health of the account. So that's probably the time you make that choice whether or not you go for the third unlock or not.
Yeah,
But
my original plan had been to buy the second like fast, to buy
mhm.
the masteries on the second champion fast. But I'm not actually generating as many 6 stars as I typically would. I only have one currently on, and I'm on day 14. So like last year, I think I had 3 by this point, or at least 2. And as a result, I was able to invest more in the gem mining and open it faster than I would otherwise. Which again, I think actually represents the way you're more likely to approach a new free to play account if you're
Mhm.
just playing it honestly. We don't push as hard as we do during the challenge. And so I think it's more realistic that you would actually unlock the gem mine relatively quickly.
Yeah, and that's probably where I would have slowed down a little bit. I did the first masteries. I could certainly argue for the second masteries, given the counts we started out with. Getting masteries on your starter, good. I went with the Monkey King because I felt that that was the good
Mhm.
both short term and long term. I know you did as well. I know other people chose to go with like Taragi, who is
Yeah.
great, but if I had Taragi as my second champion, or Ugo or Tagore, I probably would have gone the gem mine before any of those, just because I feel the masteries on those champions aren't as critical as masteries on the monkey, who can also do a lot of the wave farming and the duo
Yeah.
of Kale and Monkey is super strong for an early game. So again, that's kind of where it depends, and you kind of make the choice of what's long-term health versus this. And to be fair, putting off the gem mine for a couple days here to get masteries or another ones, those are not going to affect your account long term, really,
No,
either way.
no.
You know,
If you unlock on day 13 versus day 17, like who
yeah.
cares? It's not going to be a huge deal unless there's a specific timing that you're trying to hit for like a fusion or something,
Hmm.
in which case you may want to actually delay. You'd say, okay, let me conserve a few gems now because an early legendary that would help my roster would actually be much more valuable than just the economic benefit of the gem mine. So you might shift it by a week just for that reason. But I don't think like, delaying for one set of additional like scrolls, I don't think
Yeah.
that's going to be a major impact.
Actually a good example of that is right now we've got the Titan event for the next 2 weeks. So if somebody were to
Hmm.
start an account today, that I could actually see them maybe slow rolling the gem mine a little bit so they don't push that too hard because they may want to hold on to those 500 gems to see if they can make that fusion that starts 2 weeks into their account. Whether or not they
Yeah.
will, that's a
Yeah.
different problem, but that's a good strategy, I think. So,
Right. When you like when in Raid's calendar you start your account is really significant
mhm,
and is often completely outside of your control. You don't really think about it that way, because you're not in game checking the calendar to know what would be the perfect day to start a new account. You just do it when it's convenient to you or when you get interested in the game. But it has a major impact. The fact that, for instance, we're starting with Alice be very different than if we started with um Skeletor. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like Skeletor would have been a completely different experience. So even just the 1 month delay here has actually benefited our start significantly.
yeah. And then on top of that, like we started on Friday, most of us managed to get into a CVC by that next Monday, and that was a huge resource gain for a lot of people. And then the
Right. A lot
next
of
week,
energy. Yeah.
because we all ended up in clans, or at least most of us ended up in clans that are not involved in Siege, we didn't have a siege, which is
Right.
both a good thing because honestly, siege would have been really weird with a 14-day-old account or whatever it would have been. I was prepared to do it if I need be, but I'm like throwing in, all right, this chicken I think will still be around by the time siege is happening.
Yeah.
It's so it's definitely kind of amusing for that. But we didn't have enough in our clan, and you're in. Just before we're opposite teams here, so I'm not actually giving
Yes.
him any good advice, by the way. So don't. No, no, it's a
I don't
friendly
mind. We're giving
competition.
advice to the viewers, not each other, because
That
you
there
and
you
I are
go.
going to
Yeah, yeah.
play the
You
way
do
we
not
play. We
listen to
know
my
that. We know
advice, right?
that. Although you're doing great. I think you're currently fifth on the leaderboards today, right?
Yeah, I've been in top 10 for a while, fourth or fifth for a while, which has been impressive because for me, I have been pulling shards. Unlike I know you weren't pulling any shards. Did you pull shards on the 2X ancients?
I have not yet crunched the numbers, so I will be pulling 2 times Ancients at some point in the next 24 hours. I just don't know how many yet because I'm still focused on the next fusion. But I
Hmm.
expected the next fusion to come faster, and I think because of this Titan event, it's gonna be delayed an extra week. And so as a
Yep.
result, I have to figure out how many Ancient shards I'm actually going to get in that time frame and then do the math for the fusion because I will have enough sacreds, but you have to do a champion chase and a summon rush now. You didn't used to have to do that all the time. So I got to figure that out.
Yeah, and that's one of the things where it's kind of like I said, mine's been a hybrid strategy here because if I was going all out, I would have pulled one of my Sabbathas by now. I haven't pulled either
Right.
of them yet because that is 700 champion chase points. That
Yeah.
could make a fusion for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's massive. I have 2 copies as well. And
Mhm.
this is where I think, for instance, the the more accelerated strategy could actually benefit some accounts, right? Because if you can collect certain resources faster, that's going to make the next fusion easier, even though you've spent more resources to accelerate. So
Mhm.
potentially you're getting those resources back and the net loss is zero, but the acceleration of the account is actually a net benefit. So I'm not sure about that. Again, this is an
Yeah.
experiment from my end as well. I've never compared a challenge account to a regular account, but a lot of comments that I've had over the past year in regards to the challenge of last year was this isn't really free to play. The challenge isn't really free to play. That's not how free to players start their accounts. And it really got me thinking. I'm like, you're right, and we know that's true, but how different is it? And how detrimental could it be to start your account with a challenge versus just to start it the normal way? And I don't
Mhm.
actually know. So that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's kind of where, I'm kind of towing the line a little bit. I'm obviously going for points, but for example, I decided to avoid Nightmare Campaign entirely early on, whereas I know several people that are above me in the leaderboards had pushed way ahead of me in the leaderboards because they had done 2/3 of Nightmare Campaign already. And I just looked at it as that's an energy sink I didn't need to go for. But then I
Right.
was looking at the rewards that are there, and it's like, okay, there's a couple million silver, so that was kind of tempting. And my account had matured enough where I felt like I wasn't risking a lot to push until I couldn't do it anymore and get as much silver as I could because I wanted to do an artifact enhancement event, and I had another mission I needed the artifact enhancement for. Another one that's been kind of an interesting controversial one is in the bazaars I was in here earlier. Obviously,
Mhm.
I'm not going for Drex. I don't know if you're going to go for Drex or not. And to be fair, I can actually see a strategy even in the slow roll to not pull for Drex for the first couple of weeks
Right.
because this extra energy here is still super helpful in the slow roll. Building up ancient charge can be helpful in the slow roll. Even, you're short on skill tomes. This is not a great value, but if you're really short on rare skill tomes, you're going to be building rares. You could do worse than buying this. The ones I do think are worth buying for everyone is these are 10 fragments each of a void rare. Those are 50 points each in a champion chase as well.
Right.
So I should be able to have both of these ready for the next champion chase. That'll be an easy, again, another 100 points in there. So that's 800 points. And then in the Polarium progression, that's not here, it's the Polarium points. Here we go. I'll have Morag. I actually didn't think we were going to get this far with her, but, between the points and some other stuff, I've almost got her.
Yeah.
And if I can hold on and build the account in such a way where I don't need her until the next champion chase where it's worthwhile pulling her, that's another 250 points. I've almost gotten to the 1500 I need, and I haven't pulled a shard yet, which is,
Yeah.
that's free to play at its core, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is where you're still implementing good free to play strategies, even though you're using a more aggressive approach, right,
Hmm.
for the challenge, because you're thinking about the fusions ahead. You're thinking about how to manage your resources, double dip, triple dip, quadruple dip wherever you can. And there's more than one way to approach free to play. There's no, like, you're talking about Drexthar versus other, like,
Hmm.
you don't have to push Drexthar really fast. You can. It really depends, one, on the roster you currently have and whether or not he's going to fill a critical need. If he is, then you want to push him fast. Or two, can you use that champion in a champion chase or in a CVC or something to get yourself additional resources that are going to help in other places? So there's a whole lot of considerations, and I think for me, my goal at the outset was to do the first fusion to see if I could complete that easily and
Hmm.
consistently. And the truth of the matter is, the first fusion could be an awful champion. Do you know what I
Yep.
mean? So it may be that I need to pivot away from my initial strategy, and then, okay, now maybe Morag doesn't become a champion chase point strategy. She actually becomes a relevant champion on the roster
Yep.
because I think she synergizes well with what I've got. So now I'm doing it differently than I would have, before. And that's the other aspect of free to play, which is, while you're always looking to maximize your return on investment, you never know exactly how that's going to pan out. So you also need to be creative and flexible and keep informing yourself so you can make the best judgment in any given situation.
Exactly. And that's one of the things too is like obviously we don't have the information now, but like
Right.
this 75 relic points here, these are very valuable for an early free to play because those relics can be a huge power swing even at low levels because the worst case scenario is you're adding yourself like an extra 1000 HP, which early game is massive actually, so it's not,
Yeah.
nothing to sneeze at. If I could pull a Morag here and get these points, I would have to think about it. Obviously, I'm focused on the fusion, but if suddenly the fusion is bad and I find out far enough ahead of time, Or even if the fusion, even if the fusion is bad, I might decide that the rewards inside this champion chase are still worth pulling the champion for. So it's
Yeah.
always, you plan as much as you can, but Raid is a game about RNG at some level as well. So you're kind of slow rolling it because you're trying to hedge your bets for taking the best you can in the future. I've made some gambles early on to set myself up for the long run. The missions are certainly one of the things I've actually been really impressed. I didn't expect to be 2 weeks in and nearly done with this level of these Arbiter
Mm.
missions. I'll have this ranked 6 champion. If not soon, I'll have it tonight, which means that I'll be able to get to this Void Potion one when the Void opens again, because those are now locked for me as well. And basically, these Void Potions for the Superior are the only ones I actually had locked behind the time gate because I pushed
Mm.
far enough in these things
Right.
to get up here. And that's been huge. And it's actually nice to get to here because this is going to be a huge time sink. Affinity bonuses to level 4. I'm close. And this is where the slow roll or fast roll is kind of an interesting one as well. I spread myself out a little bit here. I
Hmm.
still think this is actually a good slow roll strategy, though. And the reason I think this is a good slow roll strategy is an extra 2%, all these stats makes life easier to build your champions. And the cost of these are 50 bronze, which is only 25 silver, which is only 13 gold.
Right.
It's actually so little to get all of these out there. And obviously, I got to do these attack ones for something else anyway. That it set me back less than 100 gold medals total on getting these higher up.
Yeah, and I think this is, where you're talking about slow roll. How slow is your slow roll? Because there are different ways to slow roll. For
Yeah.
me, the slow roll is primarily around the idea of shard usage and then time in game. Those are the two
Mm-hmm.
things that I'm saving all my shards for fusions or 2 times events, and then I'm only playing a certain number of hours per day in game. It turns out I'm averaging somewhere around 3 hours a day. It was a little bit more the first like 4 days, but I've gotten down to the point where like one day I only did like an hour. But on average, it's probably about 3 hours a day, which for some people may feel like a lot of in-game time. For me, when I compare it to last year's challenge, I was doing more than 12 hours a day for the first 2 weeks. So it was really as many hours as I could potentially put in, even if it was just things like constantly refreshing my arena page so I could find those one man defenses and just push arena harder.
Mm-hmm.
Now I barely play arena at all on the current account. And that means that my Great Hall will be moving very slowly, but my Arbiter missions are still moving very quickly. And as a result, I can't afford to spread out the bonuses because that means I'm going to get stuck on those Arbiter missions because even 100 medals is a delay of at least a day or two for me,
Mm-hmm.
if not more. And so it really, like, we're talking slow roll, but slow roll can mean different things to different people. And again, just like I was saying before, you have to kind of adapt, like figure out what your slow roll looks like and then pick your strategy. Don't go in with a strategy and say, well, I'm going to force this to happen. And then you don't have the time in game or, the resources to make it work the way you want to. You still have to kind of roll with the punches and see what happens before you commit to anything. And that's just generally good free to play philosophy anyway. It's like wait for an opportunity when you know it's good. And then when it is good, strike as hard as you can.
Yeah. And that's why, for example, I chose to pull two. I've had 3 sacreds on the account. I pulled 2 of them during the 1+1. And ultimately,
Okay.
I just determined it was early enough in the account where saving these 2 shards wasn't as valuable as the chance, even it was a 6% chance, of getting a double legendary early in the account. That being
Yeah.
said, I could have actually pulled a legendary or 2 that would have actually not helped the account at all. So maybe it wasn't the best option. And I say not help the account at all. There's some legendaries that are just not great. And there are some legendaries that are good, but there's so many resource sinks to make them good that they would have been difficult for an early game account to really take advantage of. Actually, Hell
Well,
Hades is
I
probably in a
think,
good situation with that. He's got Ruel, who takes an awful lot of
right.
investment to make good. So,
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking
yeah.
about whether or not the fusion will be good,
Hmm.
and now we're talking about like bad legendaries. But
Yeah.
this early in an account, a bad legendary is still a natural 5-star that you can use in faction crypts. And if you have one 5-star in a faction, chances are you can get to at least the first boss, if not through that first boss. Just put any gear on them
Mhm.
and, match them with some 30s that are chickens, and you can get to stage 8, and that's going to get you better forge materials, and that's going to help your account that way. And then, on some accounts, a bad legendary may still be a good legendary because it gives you a skill that you don't have otherwise. So I think one of the dangers of this kind of scenario for experienced players is that you lock in on champions too much based on your main account experience. Right?
Yep.
You say, "Oh, this is a good champion for my main account, so it's good here," or "It's a bad champion for my main account, so it's bad here." And both of those things may be untrue. There are champions I would never play on my main account who I would love to see right now on my challenge account. And there are champions who are great that I can't unlock yet. Like I couldn't empower. Like if
Mhm.
I pulled a seer today, I have no way to really make her powerful. I don't have the gear to make her powerful, and I don't have the team around her to make her powerful.
Yeah.
So as good as she is, top 5 epic, definitely, like she's not what I need.
Mhm.
And that can be true for legendaries as well as epics.
Yeah, and I like, just, talking about champions, my luck was weird early on. I've got a Frozen Banshee. Frozen Banshee was great.
Yeah.
Um, but that was the best. Frozen Banshee and Bowsmith Flannan have been probably the two of the best pulls on my account for a long time. This dude is an absolute beast of a champion with the slow, the stuns, and just been super helpful. And he was going to be my next 6-star, possibly. Actually, it was probably going to be Alice or Frozen Banshee, but he was going to be my first force 6-star because he's good enough, even as a rare, that I can see the value of him further on in the account. Particularly, he's really good in Fire Knight, and if I can't expect to get better Fire Knight champions for somebody that gives you a decreased speed and turn meter drain and an ally attack, it's kind of hard to complain about that for Fire Knight. And then obviously I pulled Geomancer, and that kind of, said, oh, well, I guess we're going to Geomancer instead. That works pretty well. But
Yeah.
like, I pulled a Spider early on. I pulled the Warden, is like this guy's dude, and Fang Cleric early on. So I don't want to do that. I want to get you whatever. But with my Kale, I suddenly have 3 epics and Kale in my primary faction wars team. So
Right.
obviously Kale's doing a lot of the heavy lifting right now, but I've got a reviver now. I have a decreased defense and weakened champ that also puts some decreased attack. I've got multiple AoEs on multiple champions. Warden's damage doesn't suck horribly, and so suddenly it's like, okay, let's build a 5-man team in that and see how far I can push that up, because those resources are going to be really important.
And if you need to round out that team, you can always go farm yourself a spirit host who fits in perfectly.
Yep.
So yeah, you're looking good in that faction. But it's interesting because you were talking about Bowsmith and building rares, and one of the topics we're discussing is things you would do, for a challenge that you might not do for the long term health of your account, and how does that change the perspective if you're trying
Hmm.
to slow roll? And for instance, I don't think I would build Bowsmith on a slow roll account unless I very specifically needed him to progress, say, in Doom Tower, because I felt I could unlock like 30 or 40 floors with him.
Hmm.
And the reason is when I'm slow rolling an account, my roster is often very good and my gear is lagging behind. And so I'm not really trying to push new champions a lot. And I also don't want to invest in a lot of 6-stars who aren't going to give me value in multiple places or for the long term. So I invest less in rares when I'm slow rolling. I actually, when I'm doing the challenge, I would say, well, can this get me progress today? I need another 6-star. I need a mission.
Hmm.
Let's push this. Let's push this. Let's push this. And so if a champion can help me in 2 areas, that's more than enough. And I don't have another option. So let's do it. And it's like that's a sacrifice for the challenge that I'd be willing to make that I wouldn't when I'm slow rolling. And I'm not saying Bowsmith is bad. I'm
Hmm.
not saying you can't get to a point on a slow roll where he becomes a good choice. I'm just saying I am going to minimize the number of rares that I'm investing in on a slow roll, and I'm going to try to prioritize epics that give me value both in the short term and in the long term. A different rare that you have pulled that I would definitely invest in is actually Frozen Banshee. She is the kind of rare that if I'm going to invest in, she's going to give me value, she's going to help me progress, and she's going to make that mid-game entry much smoother and easier. And now I don't have to worry about a legendary clan boss damage dealer for a while. Like, she's going to get me to Nightmare and farm that comfortably. That's definitely a rare worth investing. Whereas Bowsmith, I think, is more of a reach for a slow roll.
Yeah, I mean, Bowsmith is good, and I don't know if you've ever played Bowsmith or not, but he is.
I'm not saying he's not
Yeah,
good. I'm
yeah,
just saying he feels like a challenge rare to me and not a slow roll rare.
yeah, and I guess this may depend too on where your account is. You picked Aethel, for example, because you wanted to have the extra
Yeah.
triple hitter and Fire Knight specifically. I went Kale because I decided I wanted the Poisoner for Clan Boss. And honestly, I think the fact that Kale has this turn meter boost in his A2 makes him better than the others for farming as well, which is one of these things that I forget about every time until I deal with him. The fact that he can literally take another turn if he kills a bunch of champions quickly, and if you build him really fast, this resets. He's great for wave clear.
Right.
So that was kind of where I went with him. Frozen Banshee actually really fit in well with that because the poison sensitivity is great. Even if I don't get poisons from her for some strange reason later on, I get them from Kale as well. So that's stacking up particularly well. And that's, yeah, I mean, she's also good. And actually right now she's actually going to fall out of my clan boss because between Kale and Frozen Banshee and Geo, I was worried about having too many debuffs on the debuff bar and then not being able to have land Geo's burns. And I determined that Geo's burns are going to be worth more than Frozen Banshee's extra poisons and poison sensitivity. And I still think that she's worth having at 50 and possibly moving to 60 later on because she's still going to stick in my Dragon team for a long time because she's super valuable in Dragon. She's super valuable in Ice Golem later game as well because poisons against the Ice Golem are another great way to deal with it. And honestly, she will still pair well with Geo and Kale in other content. So I don't feel it's not like this was a wasted rare, even if she ends up ending at 50 because I don't need her immediately in some of the higher end content.
And this is
But
another
yeah.
one of those things where it's like, it depends when it happens
Mhm.
in terms of how you make that decision. Because Frozen Banshee is a better clan boss damage dealer than Kale is, but you have her at 50, you have him at 60. He's got an extra star for the blessing, right? He's got
Yeah.
his masteries already. So it's like,
Mhm.
even though her potential is higher than his for clan boss, he's currently stronger than she is for clan boss. And so she might fall out and you might invest in her a little bit less. But I
Yep.
did notice that you put a lot of books into her. So she's like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't want to lose the investment of those books.
Mhm.
You know, so again, if this had happened, if Geo had happened, you know, a month later, that would change your approach to Frozen Banshee. But instead, now it feels like she's being, you know, a little bit less valuable to you. So you're pushing her a little bit towards the back burner. You still want to get value out of her. But the point stands, right? Which
Yeah.
is like, when you chose to invest in her, she was
Mhm.
a high value rare for your account. Now things have changed and you have to adjust your strategy. And if you're stuck thinking, oh, I have to force this, then you're not going to be as nimble, you know, when new conditions arise. And as a free to play player, you have to be nimble.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that I did force something once that actually cost me. I don't say it cost me a lot, but I was just near where this 4-star chicken was.
Hmm.
And that was when I got my third, I think it was my third 6-star. I pushed for my third 6-star, and I literally had to wait till I ran Clan Boss to get this chicken. And instead of using that, I sacrificed a couple of champions. I was a perforator, I think, that I'd built entirely to do some dwarves. Anyway, I don't mind losing him. He was perforator sucks, but an armiger, I had sort of put a few armiger books in, quote unquote, and again, easy to get back, so it wasn't a major
Right.
sacrifice. Stuff I didn't
Yeah.
mind sacrificing, but I didn't have to because I was pushing just a little bit farther and didn't pay much attention to something as
Yeah.
simple as what's coming up here. So, and that's one of the things that it does help when you're slow rolling, because when you're slow rolling, you don't have the pressure of, I got to keep pushing, I got to keep pushing, I got to keep pushing. And that's why it's always worth balancing, and it's always worth kind of taking stock of what you have at least daily, if not, right before you do anything major.
Right. And it's funny that you say that because honestly, I've made similar mistakes in the slow roll. Like
Mhm.
I think it's impossible to play perfectly cleanly for weeks on end.
Mhm.
Especially like if you're putting a lot of time into the game, fatigue is a factor and the acceleration of the account is a factor because you're pushing and you miss little stuff sometimes. And if you're slow rolling, well, you don't have as much time in game. So you don't as carefully check everything because you think, "Oh, well, I don't have that much time. I'm just going to do these things." And then you miss out on a resource or you know, sacrifice something you didn't have to. So however your play style is, I think it's important as a free to play player to keep your eye on like two truths. I guess one is that you are in fact going to make mistakes. And two, there are very few fatal mistakes, right? You can always recover. Your account is not relegated to, being a horrible account simply because you missed some little thing. So, the min maxer in my brain will scream for a couple of minutes, like,
Mhm.
how did you miss that? And then I just have to, I just have to let it go, take a deep breath and be like, the account's going to be fine. We're just going to keep progressing and we're going to make most of the right decisions. And when we make a mistake, that's just life, and honestly, it's been much less stressful this year than last year because I've not only pushed less hard and with the slow roll, but I've actually bought into that idea a little bit more. Like I'm not trying to win in order to like make a name for myself, right? Because
Mhm.
last year I was sort of around the size that you are now, maybe, and I was like, oh, I want to show people that I'm a good player. And this year, people are like, yeah, we know how good you are. Like, don't worry about it, So I
Yeah.
feel less pressure to do that. And as a result, I can just kind of say to myself, I made a mistake. That's okay. That's not a problem. I can keep going and the count's going to be good anyway.
Yeah, and that's kind of like where I'm at too with some of these things. I've been pushing some of the missions, but a lot of it too has been pushing with a purpose. I like to always say that. I always pull with a purpose. I know you do that same thing as well. You do stuff with a purpose, and that's honestly probably even if you're fast rolling or slow rolling, it's not going to be a big difference. It's just going to be how hard you're pushing when you're doing these things. Once I get past this, and it's going to get to this two affinity bonuses right here, I can look further down and here's the three masteries. Well, this is a good time for me to sit and just farm masteries anyway, because if I finish this before I get here, I'm done. But masteries are probably the next big thing once I have 4 6 stars anyway. And pulling Geo has actually probably been a bit of a godsend from the perspective too of I had to kind of think about was I going to do Frozen Banshee as my next 6 star or was I going to do Alice as my next 6 star? Alice really isn't in my clan boss team, so while War Master would be good for her, she might make more sense in Helm Smasher even without the Peter stuff. I don't have to make that decision because Alice has been pushed a little bit to the back burner now because now I can
Yeah.
sort out clan boss just that much more. And then it's pretty much going to be all right, who are the 5 people in my clan boss team? Get in Minnow and get working and get those War Masters on everybody I possibly can because that's also a huge, huge upgrade in damage on clan boss.
Yeah. And for your account specifically, I think for all of us actually, Alice is a weird champion. Like
Mhm.
figuring out how to fit her into our roster and into our overall strategy for the challenge is difficult. Um, but specifically for you, like you've got Geomancer. He's a much, much better boss killer.
Mhm.
So that's going to take priority. And then you've invested into Wukong, so you've got your wave clear, right? So what does Alice bring you? Well, she brings you a little bit additional wave clear and a lockout. How valuable is the lockout in PvE content? It's pretty low value. How valuable is it in PvP content? Pretty valuable, but you've already invested in Wukong and you don't necessarily have to have a lockout at low levels of PvP. So, like, it'll be useful maybe in live arena when you get there, but that gives you some time to say, well, let's pull some other shards, see who else we get, who are we going to
Mhm.
invest in. You could honestly have left Alice in the vault and probably accomplished everything the same without her existence this year. You specifically, I mean,
Well,
but
actually, well, yeah.
for other accounts, it's going to be a much
Mhm.
higher value champion, and you just have to figure that out.
Yeah, and here's the other thing too. Some of this is looking at timing. We're
Yeah.
what? So a week or so away from starting to get these extra stars here. So my goal kind of with her now is she's eventually going to replace Kale in Arena because she will be a better Arena nuker, particularly once this 4-star soul drops. But
Yeah.
even at 6 stars, she will be a better Arena nuker than Kale. Even though my Kale does hit hard, my Kale's built very, very well because gear has been wonderful to me. I mean, the fact that I've got, I mean, this is a defense amulet, but I've got an actual amulet on him. I've got 2-piece pinpoint on here, which has given me all this accuracy. I've got tons of speed. I've got all the crit damage stuff. I've actually been able to build. I pulled him out of the lifesteal because my lifesteal was so bad. But I had him in
Yeah.
lifesteal and him in regular stuff because I needed the accuracy on Kale. So I said, all right, I'm going to build Kale with a little more accuracy and not the lifesteal. Wukong with the lifesteal. That's why I did masteries on the two of them as well, because I specifically went for Life Drinker, because Life Drinker can kind of substitute as lifesteal light, sort of. And yeah, it's been an interesting, dive into how you're going to strategize your account, where you're going to prioritize. I've certainly focused on Arena a bit. That was one of the reasons I did go for the Monkey King. I think he's an
Yeah.
amazing champion for Arena. But I
He is.
think I'm going to get a huge boost on Alice once I get that soul. So if I can prepare the rest of the account for doing other things well, and then I can dedicate like 3 days to getting Alice to 60 6-star masteries, and then I suddenly make a huge jump in Arena, and that's another good thing. And I have time to do that now because that's the way the missions are working.
Yeah, I think that 5-star soul obviously plays an important role, as you mentioned. And I do believe that as far as nuking is concerned, like Alice is sort of um she's a choice,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're like, okay, she's a better nuker than Kale. That's true, but Kale is already built. He's cheap to build, he's valuable and he's still doing a decent job. But you've got the monkey, and the monkey is basically the best nuker that you own if you want him to be. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he's better than Alice as a nuker. So you don't necessarily need her as a nuker. You can choose it and go that route, and for me, I bought Alice's masteries as soon as I got her, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely 6-starring her next. And then I thought, well, maybe I should have invested in the monkey more. But now that I've got her, all right, let's lean in that direction. We'll get the 5-star soul, we'll get her to 6 stars, and she'll be used everywhere for a time. And then I don't know, then I'll have to see. I'll have to adapt, see how my roster progresses. So I think for some accounts, she's going to be highly valuable. And for other accounts, she's going to feel like a mistake, which is interesting because I think most of the login reward champions in the past have either been extremely good, like Artak, Wukong, Ninja, or kind of questionable, like Adeline,
Mm-hmm.
and Alexander and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so this is it's an interesting login champion because I think for the challenge, there are going to be a lot of different approaches to her, and I'm going to want to see what everybody does. But I have a feeling that the 5-star soul may be the make or break thing, where for most players, they're just like, well, a 5-star soul is a 5-star soul, and that's so valuable that I may lean into Alice anyway, just for the soul.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, there were people in the what's it called? With Adeline, we're leaning on the 5-star soul, billing her with accuracy because 5-star brimstone on her was actually valuable, and it brought a
Right.
support champion that also brought brimstone for people.
Yeah.
So, but this feels like a good stopping point because we obviously have some stuff that we want to talk about, and
Sure.
on your account as well, and on your channel. So we can certainly look at your account and critique that a bit, and talk more about things we're identifying for long term, as I think kind of what we're going to aim for that on a little bit more. So it's always been great having you. I love talking with you. It's nice having somebody else who's willing to go deep into this stuff, and it's nice to have another thoughtful, or maybe the first thoughtful, depending on who you think, ask, on the channel. But yeah.
Well, I appreciate you. It's always fun to talk to you, and I never get tired of taking deep dives into Raid. I'm always a little
Mhm.
bit worried. It's like, I love it. I don't know that if everybody loves it, but yeah. Ask me another question, Bront. Ask me another one.
Yep.
I will keep talking about this stuff for days. So I'm happy that this is only half of the conversation. Now we get to go to my channel and continue chatting today. So
Yeah, what you guys
yeah,
don't
it's great.
see is we were talking about 15 minutes before we even got on here. We're talking in chat oftentimes afterwards. I think last time we did the collab, we ended up talking for almost an hour afterwards about
At
random
least.
stuff too.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
so, and all the Raid content creators are great, but it's definitely fun talking with you. I definitely enjoy it and glad you enjoy talking with me here as well. So,
Like it.
Go over to his channel. There'll be a link afterwards. There'll be a link down below as well. Hit that like button here. Hit that subscribe button. Let us know what you think, whether or not you think the slow roll or the fast roll is a better way to play, or whether or not it's enjoyable for you. Because that's ultimately, I think, the best thing for it too, is we can tell you what's better for your account, but what are you going to have fun with? Because I think that's really kind of the most important part. So take care, everyone. Smash that subscribe button. See you guys later and see you on his channel. I'm Bront CatHerder. That's Colred.